Good morning, Sean. Can you hear us?
Yep.
Oh,
How's my sound coming through on that end?
yeah, it's beautiful. Can you hear
Okay.
us okay?
I can't hear you at this table very well, or whoever that was.
Hi, Sean. It's Jody from Community Research.
Right, I can hear you okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so if we're close to this gadget, you'll be able to hear, but I'm just going to get a microphone so that we can set it all up. Do you just want to cue your video so that's ready to rock and roll, and I will just give you co-hosting duty so that you can have a play your end.
Okay. Right. Sorry, I'm just playing with all my screens.
You're all good to go, Sean. You just have a play with your video, and we'll just make sure that we can hear it all right from where we are. I'll send you a photo via email so that you can see the setup of the space as well.
Okay. So can you see my slide there? And
You
here's...
can. For some reason, it's kind of small. I'll just send you a photo so you can see what it looks like outside.
Okay. Here. Relatively calm. Looks like I can hear the...
Hold on, I'm just going to pass it around. Can you see that little? You're that little box in the middle.
Yeah, it's teensy.
Yeah.
Is the audio coming through on the from PowerPoint?
No audio either. Can you enable audio your side?
All I hear is the wind.
But we've got quite a big space. I'm just here. Welcome to the Fale Pacifica. Soon you'll hear from the amazing designer about this beautiful space, but it's rather large. I might even see if I can go up in the air. Hang on. You can see all of that. It's quite a big space.
Okay. Yep.
And then I'll do a little introduction to the team that are in the room whilst I get you all set up technically. Cool. There you go.
Okay, I'm gonna try sharing this. Wow, that's the wrong button again. I'll share this a different way.
Want to say hello? Oh, sure. No. Yeah.
Oh, let's see if this works any better.
Yeah.
Does
And,
that take up more of the whole screen then instead of the?
Yeah, that looks heaps better. Look at that.
Albert, last week to chat about this, and he said he'd be able to just be part of the panel and have this audio. Yeah.
So if I'm here,
Yeah.
it's relatively calm.
Oh, yeah.
It's like I can hear the traffic on the road, and it's totally part of this world. If I take a few steps out this way, it's windier and windier.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. I'm just going to turn it up a little bit more, Sean, but we can hear you.
Waves. And it's like that world is totally receded. But obviously, if I take a few more steps, I'm going to be totally in that world. And so, right here.
No, and I'm wondering then if I talk at the same time, loud as hell.
It's windier and windier. So if I'm here, all I hear is the wind and the waves.
Sean, so the sound isn't great from the video. I'm wondering if could you mute it your side, but just talk to it and you be like our live narrator?
That would assume that I can remember what the hell it's saying.
I don't know. Yeah, take some
Yeah,
artistic
I can do that.
creativity, but I just
Yeah.
want it to be effective because again, we'll just kind of hear you. There's a bit of wind in the background, and but I'll try and play with the sound.
No, no,
hang
I
on.
can
Hang on,
narrate.
have another go and play that again, and we'll just see because we've got the technical people in here now.
I can narrate it. I just would have to make myself a few notes.
Yes, they were. Oh, this lovely lady here's got one.
Okay, I'll try that again. Share sound, share.
Yeah. I'll just give you the green light. We're just gonna figure out what to do here, and then we'll see.
Yeah, the sound quality is not very good on it already because it's really windy where I filmed it. But that was part of what I was trying to capture was the wind noise.
Oh, good. What I'd like to do is ensure that when we're going to be on that panel in there, it'll be just good to make sure that he can hear us.
Basically, I'm setting up so that it comes up to speak.
Oh, okay. Okay, Sean, maybe have a cup of tea for a little bit and just chill. We just got to reset the microphones. What we want to make sure of is that we can make it as interactive for you as possible. So we're going to all be on the tables over here. Might not be able to see everything close up, but just give me a heads up if you can't hear. Hang on, where are we?
Yep,
No.
okay.
Yes, please. You're going to get one. Get one. Can I please have a chai latte? A chai latte? Yeah.
I love a skinny cappuccino, please.
No special milk.
Um,
I love how we're all drinking coconut. It makes me feel so much like having a meal with it. It makes me feel less alone because every time I order.
Thanks, Sean. I'll call you soon.
No. It's the
Um,
football.
Maybe just, I don't know if Goldie's made it order. How was the size? Did you feel good about it? It looked awesome. Cool. I was top notch. Yeah. Have you seen the
Oh, hey, I just noticed that you're already recording on your end.
I was
You want to turn the recording off?
and yeah, they were in the middle of making me yeah. And also I saw the books that as well, like Judy and the Taker. Yeah. Did you feel the
They
yeah, why do we why? Oh, yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, yeah, so they got that. Yeah, so we got them out, just, yeah, so just to make sure that we got our few. And then we can find another. Great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Where did you say my number?
Oh, she talked about this fellows.
Oh,
And then, but I did. So you get commercial changes.
no, yeah, yeah. It's original. Yeah. So that's when the album. He's got nothing.
So it was.
We're so glad you Because we were like, yeah. Yeah. Because we were like, maybe to put some kind of like just the price, which would have been good at some ways. But that's $60. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, you could do what about?
Yeah.
Friday,
Yeah.
all the stuff.
Yeah.
And
Something that that's what I mean. I picked up this.
we've got
Yeah.
opposite
Yeah.
the booth and.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah, that's, I know. Well, we could do another one. I think we were doing on RNC. It was like a lot of people think I should do another one because we did a lot of research and refine it down to something like this. So it's a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I said as well. Yeah. And I don't know who's what they're doing. Yeah. That was like I think just keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, bigger. But in my mind, that's.
Big, yeah. Oh,
Journals. Sees himself. Yeah, I think it's kind of been a very good discussion. I'm glad to hear that Charles studies with the, environmental particles. That was really, really good. Oh, no, I don't think I didn't do that. When I use those words, I think I really one of those things that was true. We haven't tried that much. Being some students.
It was interesting how he did the Harvard.
Love Island, Love Island. Where they have where they put, they transfer
E ni ka whakahoki ake ngā whakapai me ngā whakawhetai, kia koe tēnei rā. Whakamākūkūngia mai ngā purapuro te mātauranga, ngā purapuro te whakapona i rui i horai ngā mātue, ngā tūpuna. Kia tupu ai aua purapura kia pua wai, kia whai hua, kia pātunu mai rā tō kakara pai ki runga kia mātau. Papuhi mai rā ta pūtātara hei whakaoha ake i o mātau hiningaro. Māwana hoki o mātau ngākau e tuku kia hotu i te rānei. E mātau huitahi nei ki roto i tō mātau Whale Pasifika. Me ona kōrero, me ona hitoria. Mo tēnei kaupapa nui. Kohi kohia, ngā whakaaro, ngā hiahia, ngā wawata, ngā tumanako, ngā kōrero katoa ka puta i roto tēnei hui. Kia ara atu ai aua āhuatanga hei turareka ki mua ki tau arawaro. Kia rongo rāko ki te kakara ki roto ki tēnei mininga. Pātu kia rātou te hunga ko poto ki te pō, te oki ngā tonutanga, kia whiti kia rātou te māramatanga mutinga kore. Mainga kia whaihua e tēnei hui o mātou. Kia whio mai rā, tō wairua whakawhanaunga, tō wairua whakahoahua. Kia tino rata ai te iwi kua hui mai nei ki roto ki tēnei wānangi te rānei. Kia mahia mai nei wa mātou mahi katoa mo toi krori te take i te ao, i te pō, i te pō, i te ao. Whano, tū mai te ripe ka haumi e hui e tāi ki.
He aha te hau, he wawara. He tiu he raki. Nāna ia mai te puputara ki Kiota. E tiki nā tu e au te kotu ko i te pau whakairo kātū ki te Waitemata i Oku Wairangi. E ti hewa mauri ora. E aku nui, e aku rahi, e aku mātanga, e whakarau i ke mai nei roti te kaupapa, te rānei ki tēnei whare a tāhua. Nau mai, hara mai, whakatau mai. Nau mai i rungi te karanga o tēnei whale. A me ona kōrero katoa, nā pau e tū mai nei, te lalapa e tui nā tini, a whakaro ngā mātua tupuna i ngā wā o mua, a tai atu ki tēnei rā a huri ki te whale, kia o mātou whanaunga no te moana nui a kiwa, nau mai. Hara mai hoki te karanga o te ringa raupa i whakatū tēnei hui ko tātou. Ka huri a hau ki a koe e Sean, te rangatira, e noho pūmau, he wainga nui o tupuna, a tēnā koe mauri a mai o tini āhuatanga ki te tūhono. Kia mātou. Huri ki a rātou ko whetirangitia, noho pūmau ki te atua, noho mene mai nei, noho i roti era o ngā mātauranga, e tukuna mai ki a mātou ki tēnei Aotearoa, rātou ki a rātou, noho ki reira tātou ki a tātou, ko piri mai nei, i roti te karanga o te rā, a tēnā tātou katoa. E mihi ana ki a koutou kotai, aku rangatira. Nōku te honore ki te tuku i ne kupu. Ki ngā mātanga, Albert, Kapua, Edmund, Kay Marie, nā au te karanga, nā mātou haramai tautoko i a koe ki te taha tō tātou ahurangi a Sean, noho ki tōna kāinga. Koe, pare au te mea nui mo tēnei rā, hoi e he mea nui mōku ki te tuku nā mihi ki a tātou, te tīmatanga o tēnei hui. Nā reire, kei te mihi ki a tātou katoa. Tēnā tātou katoa. Morning, everyone. Just to reiterate some of the words of welcome, it's a privilege on behalf of our office, on behalf of Te Kawaho, to do that in particular alongside our whanaunga in this beautiful whale and all of the kōrero and history that it represents as it sets the scene for today's conversation. Just to acknowledge to those of you that were able to come to Tāne Nuiarangi yesterday, and to be part of our conversation in relation to mahi toi, the arts, the whare tapere, and all of those related histories that connect nicely with what we're talking about today. Research of ceremony is quite a poignant thing, considering the framework that we've just gone through now around the ceremonial aspects and what they're intended to invoke amongst those that are participating. So I mentioned yesterday in my work in the Whare Tūtaua, all of these things that we do in a physical act are really there to draw out information and try and understand the people that we're working towards. And so in that regard, the ceremony is part of that. In the Pupu Tarakihi, this 3D printed version of a Pupu Tarakihi, and in the opening part of my speech was a kōrero from here, from 1840. As one of our matakite, our seers, sought to find a way to understand the new presence in the north that was making its way down south, that being the crown and what it might represent to us as a people. And so we're still working these things out as part of our ceremonial practices. Hoi. And so with that, welcome, welcome, welcome. Wonderful to see everyone here. Mihi ana kia kōrua, no ki reira. Ki te arahina mai i a mātou i ngā tikanga o te moana nui a kiwa, ki te mihi kia kōrua. Kia tātou katoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Uia ngā kākano i te moana nui a kiwa, whera ki te moana rongo nui herea, ngā waka ki te pau whakairo ka tuki, wai te mata, i raro i te maru o ngā maunga tapu, ko wai papa te manawa whenua, o wai papa tau matarau. Ora tātou.
Ora tātou. How's everyone feeling this morning? All right, woo. Cool. Hey, thank you for opening our event. I'm Sean, it's awesome to have you join us, beaming in from the other side of the world. Thank you to all of the hosts here of this beautiful Fale Pacifica. It's wonderful to be able to weave our cultures and our stories and our rangahau, our research together in different ways. For those of you that have joined us this morning, it's wonderful to have you. This has been a bit of a wonderful journey of weaving this all together. So I've just got a few acknowledgements to make. Firstly to Te Kaweho Hoskins and Melinda Weber, who thankfully, after me emailing asking if we could please host something here, they agreed. So tēnā koe Te Kaweho, me koe Melinda. Also my colleague Gauri from Community Research, I wish to acknowledge you as well. This is an opportunity for community research to connect to researchers and explore how this platform of connecting community organisations and kairangahau researchers together in a meaningful way. So I'd really love to encourage those of you here to connect with Gauri and explore how we might be able to collaborate. And my history with community research has been over the past 7 years, helping to host some of the webinars. And Janie Wilson, who was the previous general manager of community research, I've been jamming with her for the last couple of years. She's a fangirl of yours, Sean. So I have to acknowledge her because it was really her visioning that wanted to find a way to bring you into this conversation. She wasn't quite sure how it would unfold. And we felt that it was important to do it kanohi in person rather than trying to recreate researcher ceremony online. But I think we're gonna have quite a cool day, and we're gonna try and be as open, as flexible as we can. We don't have the the hardcore technical capabilities, but what we do have is lots of love in the room. And so Sean and everybody here, I'm just asking for a bit of flexibility. I might be emceeing a little bit, then I might be going over there and playing with the gadget to make sure everything works. But the main thing for me is that you have a really good time and experience, and that we get to learn from one another as well. The other group I wish to acknowledge is the Atlantic Fellowship of Social Equity. So I am a fellow. I went through last year. I haven't quite completed my master's yet, but thankfully I've got a bit of a reprieve, so I get to do that. But I'm going to talk a bit, if time allows, about some of the discoveries that I've made in Indigenous banking and also some of the work that I've been working around mapping the Māori tech sector. So we've got a bit of time, but it's actually not about me. It's about you and our beautiful hosts today as well. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to invite our beautiful panelists up here. If you can come up here and make yourselves comfortable. And then what I am going to do as well is I'm going to just pass the microphone around so that everybody can just say who's who. I think often we just talk at each other and we never really get to know who's who. We don't have a great deal of time, i hoa ma. So what I'm going to ask is your name and what brings you here. Yep, so I'm listening for that. Your name, what brings you here today, and then we'll get rocking and rolling. Is that okay with you, Sean? Awesome. All right. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to Te Kaweho, who's our amazing kaitaka wainga.
to just kick us off and then we'll pass it around.
Oh, kia ora tātou, mihi ana ki a koe Sean, nau mai hara mai wanganui a tātou. Kia ora tātou, I'm Te Kawehau, most of you know me. I want to acknowledge a group of our first cohort of Indigenous methodology doctoral students in the room, and it's good to see you guys here today. And just to acknowledge all of the people who have contributed to bringing today into being our team and all of us.
Kia ora no tātou, ko Michael Steedman, tōku ingoa no Ngāti Whātua, Rākei Ahau, and I'm Te Kawehau's deputy and supporter in the office.
Kia ora tātou, ko Anaka tōku ingoa, koe tu horangatira o tēnei. Ki konei. I'm a teacher at Newton Central School.
Kia ora tātou, ko Gauri tōku ingoa. I'm a kaituhono at Community Research. And thank you, Kay Marie, for also bringing all of this together. This is wonderful. Thank you to all of our hosts today. Thank you also to Fale Pacifica for hosting us. And I look forward to connecting with all of you. Yeah. Kia ora koutou katoa, Rinaho. I'm up here from libraries, and I'm really interested to listen to your aro about Rangaho, and I'm really privileged to be here. Thank you. Ora.
Kia ora koutou, ko Rachel Te Pera tōku ingoa. I'm a research assistant with Te Kupenga Hawara Māori. I'm interested in Indigenous methodologies, particularly how we can have African philosophy working alongside.
Morena all, my name's Nina. I'm only a recent employee of the university. I'm working up at ORSI, the Office of Research Strategy, and I'm here for personal interest and also building relationships of transdisciplinary futures.
Ora koutou, ko Manihiri Huatai tōku ingoa. I am a staff member with Waipapa Taumatarau, but I'm here today in my capacity as a PhD student, and really interested in the kōrero that will go around. A close friend of mine, Dr. Dara Kelly, I don't know if you know her, Sean, but she first put me on to Researchers Ceremony, and I haven't yet engaged in the book, but it's always been on my reading list, so I'm really excited to be here today.
Kia ora tātou katoa, kia koutou ngā tangata o te moana nui a kiwa, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia koe e te kai rangahau matua ko Sean, he mihi ki a koe I runga I te ipurangi I tātanei, nō reira. Kia ora tātou katoa, ko au te kaiarahi I roto I te tari he manga tau hoko hoko. If you don't know what that is, that's the business school. Kia ora tātou.
I'll come across to you, my brother.
Malota mau e pongpongini. My name is Siona Atasiuloa, just PhD in anthropology, ethnomusicology, just here to support the tokos and the friends and those overseas. Hello.
Hello. Awesome. Now, thank you, my bro, stepping in, being our cameraman at the back. You're the host of our event. I'd love you to just introduce yourself to our whānau too.
Tala whalawa malo lele, everyone. My name is Ben Louis. I am one of the Fale managers, recently got promoted until next year. It's lovely to have you guys to utilize the space and to see the connection here. So welcome, and yeah, I hope you enjoy your day. Malo.
I am Rena, I'm part of the Fale crew. Lovely to host you guys.
Thank you. All right, moving around. You, Sean, we go
Waire mana helps also keep things stitching and moving together.
Kia ora, yeah, I'm here supporting the PVC Māori and Kay Marie. And yeah, kia ora.
Kia ora, I'm Nate. I'm a doctoral candidate here at the University of Auckland in sociology, philosophy, and yeah, I'm Papuan from the village of Yorkia in the Gulf province of Papua New Guinea. Cool.
Malolele, Te Kaueha already introduced us, but my name is Emeline Unga. I'm a doctoral student from Te Punawānanga.
Kia ora tātou. Ko Carol Tokuingoa. I'm one of the Doctor of Education candidates along with these guys, and I'm originally from England, but I've been here 12 years. Thanks.
Kia ora, I'm Rosanna. Chloe has already introduced us, and it's a real privilege and to be here and to be part of this today.
Tēnā tātou, tēnā koe Sean, tēnā koe Kay Marie, koutou katoa ko kotahi mai runga I te kaupapa, ko Jade Flavelahau, no te aroa Ngāpuhi Ngāti Parau, Ngāti Tūwhare tō Ngāti Hine, tēnei te mihi kia koutou me te kaupapa.
Kia ora tātou, aroha mai for being late. My name is Mel Wall. I'm also one of the doctoral candidates. I'm also a staff member in this institution. So it's lovely to be here and I'm super excited with the panel. So thanks so much. Anyone missed out?
Tēnā tātou, I'm Kapua O'Connor and I'm also a PhD over at Waipapa down here. My supervisors are Teal Peter McDowell and Tracy McIntosh. But I also came from Te Punawānanga where I knew that, the likes of Te Kawiho and also my supervisor over there, Melinda Weber. And Melinda is the co-author of this book that I'll be talking about shortly. Kia ora.
Kalawhalawa, te lolu pa ia malu tātou whale, manu e whole tātou whaasotanga lenei aso talafa Sean, Albert Rafiti. I'm a convener of the Vamoana Research Cluster from AUT, and wonderful to see you again, Sean.
Parapeke o whamarmaro atu ngai tā whatapo, tā moke whai mareko ni ki o whenua kia 12. Edmund Fihoko, from the Kingdom of Tonga. And today I'm just here to mix your kava and have a good time, really. Thank you again to Professor Hoskins. I'm a postdoctoral fellow here at the School of Pacific Studies. And as of next year, January, I will be leaving the University of Auckland to take up a senior lecture position at the University of Otago. So looking forward to that move. But other than that, I'm looking forward to today's Talanoa and how I can weave in kava as a ceremony in our research practices. Kia ora.
Awesome. All right. So Sean, I know that you're there. Just spiritually, your presence, no matter where you are in the world, it's awesome to have you here. And it's great to hear all of you, where you're from, what brings you here. I'm certain we're going to have a great time together as well. And before we kick off, health and safety, in case of something that may occur, we're just going to gently make our way out the door and just gather, and then I think we go up the stairs or go somewhere where there is no danger. Bathrooms are here to the left, as well as a kitchen. We've got to figure out a time when we might have a bit of a cup of tea, etc. But is there anybody like starving and need a kai yet? Can we just kind of groove on a little bit and then we'll pause and then I'll make sure that we feed you as well. So we've got more food coming as well. So as part of researcher ceremony, I felt it was important that we all connect. We definitely need to connect over kai. It's exciting. We'll be connecting over kava. It's going to be a lot of fun. But otherwise, what I thought would be wonderful to kick us off is we are in this beautiful whale, and there's a story about this space. I think it's also important that the voices of Moana Nui a Kiwa talk to us about what it was that inspired you. How was it that you ended up co-creating and building this space and what it was that that inspired you. So I thought I'll just pass it across to you to share some insights in the design and the thinking of this particular whare, which helps ground us where we are at this moment in time.
So short history. I think when the Waipapa Marae and the Wharenui was just about to open, the university hired Albert Wendt as a professor here, and that I think it was during a visit of that complex that the university vice chancellor at the time had a little talk to Albert Wendt's ear about a similar complex for Pacifica here at the university. So we're going back to the late 1980s when Albert Wendt first came on campus. And since then, the project was in planning, and it wasn't until the late 1998, 1999, when the discussion started to happen, and I was brought on board as the architectural expert in the Pacific. And we had wonderful discussion with Māori studies, people like Margaret Mutu, and about the will of the university to have a place for a Pan-Pacifica place for to host the community. And it was decided quite early on to have a Samoa Tongan model, because obviously we make up the biggest community here in Auckland. And so this house is in the form of, in Samoa, it's a Faleafolau. I'm not too sure. I think it's just called Fale in Tonga. So the house was built in the form of the Faleafolau, the Tahuhu, or the Au. There is no Au in the house. That was an argument between the main architects, which is Jasmax, as myself as a Pacific architect. So one thing to point out to the university, there still need to be a Au or Taualunga or Tahuhu to be placed in this house to make it complete. It's a beautiful house. It was not built by a traditional tufunga, but all the will and the wishes of the community for the whale is here. And over time, the house is lashed by Sopole Malama, Lipitohi, Tongan, artist, very wonderful member of the community, who actually has a Samoan Matai title, Sopole Malama, from my district in Whastauta in Samoa. And there are a number of commissioned artworks which allows the house to be grounded in the contemporary reality of Aotearoa community. Jim Viviares, love wonderful birds, normal birds, frigate birds on the Malay. Also the gateway hovering above you is by Tomui Koloni, Tongan, wonderful Tongan architect and artist. Fatufeu, wonderful guardian here outside here. Fatufeu, one of our senior artists. And the Malaya was designed by a wonderful Cook Island artist, Cecilia, and the design for the little kind of island rock over there was by Lili Laita, and who also has work in the whale there. So the world is to provide a platform for a Pan-Pacific gathering place, and over the years there's been events and art that are happening in the place to really kind of ground it into the reality of the Moana cosmopolitan reality of Aotearoa.
Mai te Pakipaki, i hoa mā. So for you, obviously you spoke to the right people. The marae helped to also inspire a need to have a gathering space for the communities, the many communities and nations of the Pacific. What were some of the challenges that you may have bumped into, maybe from the university, or even how to weave all of the different cultures together to be part of this space? What were some of the ways that you worked through those?
Challenges. Okay,
I think the main challenges for this whale is never really had a kaitiaki. Although it's attached and, you know, looked after by the Central Pacific Studies, people come and go. There's never really been a hosting group. There was a Pacific advisory group that was put together to follow and to guide the process for building on the whale, but when the whale was built, the university dropped the whole project. When Doug Hood, your former Vice Chancellor, moved on, that whole group disappeared. Some of those really important members of the community have since passed away, no acknowledgement of all that. And so there is that mismatch between a wonderful aspiration for the community, which is wonderful house, but never has been a proper guardians of the whale. I guess I'm the only one that has the memory of the project, and I've written a wonderful paper. Ro Hoskin and myself wrote a paper. He wrote about the beginnings of the Waipapa and the whare there, and I wrote in the same chapter about the beginning of this in the wake of that project. And that's probably the only real history of the whale that's been recorded. And it would be wonderful if there is a kaitiaki group made up of people that are not necessarily university people to really ground this complex in the proper location.
It's an awesome widow, awesome challenge for the university, but also I wonder how your other colleagues can maybe awhi that process as well, because I think that's very important for a whare to be lived in and to have a community that are connected and spending time here. So it's excellent. My last question to you is the kaupapa of today's conversation is about research as ceremony. As a designer, you know, and being involved in quite large projects, how do you interpret that thinking around research as ceremony in your work as a designer?
Well, I think it's a really important one, because as Indigenous knowledge has become very, very important in the work of the university, the work of Aotearoa and most other countries that have Indigenous people. For most of us, and I know my colleague here, Edmund and others here, the ideas or concepts that come from our traditions have become very important. And it's become the way we not just get into the way the tools of methodology and the Palangi or Pakeha world, but also in the way to kind of, you know, for me as a Samoan, it's very hard to critique Samoan knowledge with the Samoan language and the knowledge of Samoan custom and ceremony. You just can't critique. The language does not allow, and I'm sure most Indigenous communities. But Palangi language allows me to do that. And so it's allowed me to look at the wonderful ways that our communities thrive in their knowledge of the world, knowledge of nature as not just a singular thing, but multiple things. And nature has so many eyes because they are the ancestors. So our role as Indigenous scholars and researchers is to use the Palangi frameworks to really carefully uncover those things that our ancestors, our ceremonies, because I think that we have to be able to paint the world, or someone in the creative arts, or construct the world. And, you know, so what do we do when you can't see things? You wipe the windshield, or you paint eyes on things so that the ancestors can look in, or many natures that our world is made of can see us. And I think that's why the role of ceremony and ritual is really important. It's the only way for us to have that spiritual rhizomatic connection with the world of the past, to allow us to work in the present. And wonderful hui we has yesterday, and the articulation of always the past, present, and future as a continuous work, not leave the past behind, plan for the future, or our direction always the future, but always returning to that cycle of past, present, and future. And I think that's what the role of ceremony and our rituals are, really, is to teach us to keep that flow between those important places. Yeah, I don't know if I answer that.
It was perfect, and a really nice segue to move us across to you, Sean, because of course, this wasn't really a gathering of panelists, and as we're talking at people, my understanding was Sean was really interested to share knowledge, exchange, and maybe even debate. I don't know about the critique side, but perhaps, you know, just sharing some ideas between nations, which I'm hoping that we'll get to over the course of today. And so I thought, Sean, perhaps, you know, you've got a statement that we use in our poster, is that if essentially if research doesn't transform you or doesn't change you, then perhaps you're not doing it right. And that, I think, is a quite nice frame for your conversation. So I'm going to pass it, Ako, over to you, Ehua, if you can talk to us about who you are, where you come from. I know that we've got the video sort of in the background, and I'll just kind of blow you up on the screen so that we can just look at you. So we will disappear for a moment, but know that we're here. So I'll pass it across to you, Sean.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate the welcome that you've given me into your Fale. And pardon me if I get my language wrong too, because I worked a lot with Native Hawaiians too. So my tendency would be to sort of call it Hale instead of Fale. So apologies if my language slips up, but you know, that's the problems with working across so many different people. I tried to learn different little bits of language, and I end up getting everyone's language mixed up, which is really disrespectful. But it's kind of like, well, that's part of the problem of doing this international type of research. So I'm going to share like a little PowerPoint presentation, but I started making one and it turned really big because I started thinking about some stuff I wanted to talk about, and it kind of got out of hand. So I'll go through it really quick, because I think the more important part for me is the conversation. And you know, what I really like about having a place like a Hale or a Fale is that the space that it creates is it creates a sacred space where knowledge can emerge. So I would say we're not discovering Indigenous knowledge. I don't like that word because, you know, it sounds too much like Captain Cook. But what we are doing is when we create this safe space, we allow a space for knowledge to emerge where it wants to come and visit with us. So we can visit with knowledge, and it's happy to come and visit with us here too. So that's, you know, often a big part of different ceremonies that we do is creating the space around us to be a safe space where we can all work together, and the spirits and everything is welcome and feels safe to emerge there. All right, so I'll share this. And hopefully it works. So I specifically I started thinking about, all right, well, let's think about sacred knowledge. And as it's like, I talk about research as ceremony all the time. And I thought, well, let's talk about it in a slightly different sense, because I think oftentimes what I end up talking about is just regular old boring research. Not that it's boring, it's really will never do research nowadays that the community is asked for. But it's slightly different when you start to think about sacred knowledge and how that works in a research space. So if I put up this map, you probably all recognize what that map is, and it's kind of like, if you do this sort of regular university introductions, and it's like all the different places that I've worked and papers that I've written and all that sort of crap. But that's a very specific perspective and very specific view on how knowledge works. And I hope that you realize something weird about that map too. So if I switch that map around a little bit, hopefully that makes a little bit more sense for you all down there. Oh, I should say up there, and if I'm down here. So if I introduce myself a little bit better, I'm from Opaskwayak, which is, so my river is the Saskatchewan River. So that is a picture of the Saskatchewan River. So part of my my land and my teachings is around that, but it was like, we don't really have mountains where I'm from, so I can't tell you what my river and my mountain, I can tell you what my river is, but we don't have mountains because we live on the Saskatchewan River Delta. So it's the really flat and it's really wet. So our sort of English name that we've given for our tribal people has been Swampy Cree. It's like we live in the swamps of the Saskatchewan River Delta. So that's, I guess, the Opaskwa Hills, which are kind of over here somewhere, are the closest thing we have to mountains, but they're not really mountains. And where I work right now is at University of British Columbia, which is down there. So yeah, that's where I'm from. And I hope that you recognize, when you're switching the perspective like that makes a big difference in how you look at things. So I really want to talk a little bit more about how our perspectives change, right? So it's important to recognize, the way that our classrooms have changed. So this picture is a picture of my dad when he went to the Indian Day School in our community. So there's, I don't know if you can see where my pointer is, but that's my dad right there. To go from that and then residential schools where the language and the culture was literally beaten out of us, into areas where we're starting to now how our classrooms have changed. So this is the Hale on University of Oahu, University of Hawaii West Oahu campus, and having places like Hale and Fale on university campuses is awesome. Our classrooms have changed. The way that we do research has changed. Because we have adapted and we've recovered, I think, a lot from the impact of colonialism and are doing things our own way again. But one thing that we need to think about also is how we go about changing our ceremonies. Okay. I think our research has changed from being this colonial extraction of our knowledge into something now where it's us, we doing our own research for our own people, our own communities. So it's kind of like we also have to consider, our cultures change to adapt to our times, and how do we change our ceremonies to adapt in the same way? Which for a lot of people, that's kind of even sacrilege to say that, but I think that it's something we need to address at a certain point. And so that I'm happy to talk about this with an Indigenous audience. I wouldn't necessarily talk about this with a really sort of white stream audience, because it's kind of our internal business, I suppose. So I think for me, that a big part of doing this, and I start thinking about, well, how the heck do we do ceremonies in an online space? So it's like, as we're doing today, we're having this teaching ceremony in an online space. So for me, the first part then of figuring out how that works was to actually go and do a ceremony. So I did a ceremony up on this headland well, it's just right around the corner from where these trees are right there. So these are some of the lessons that I got out of doing that ceremony and engaging with the knowledge that came to me from that land there. All right, so the first thing that was really important was part of the ceremony itself was the journey to get to the ceremony site. So part of that is there's like a physical journey that I had to take in order to get there, but it's also really metaphoric as a spiritual journey and preparation of myself in a spiritual sense in order to enter that space where I was going to do that ceremony. So there's a big part of the deliberation and the intentionality of going there. Like, so I was walking to that space with intention of doing something and having that in my mind, and so that I'm entering the space, entering into that space where the ceremony was going to take place with sort of pure heart, if you will. All right. So there's that importance of the journey to get there. You know, there's, again, a really important thing to think about too is the language that we use. So, you know, all Indigenous languages come from the land. So part of my, I don't even know what to call it, impact of assimilation and impact of colonialism on my people is that I don't know Cree. So I can speak some words in Cree, but I definitely don't know enough Cree to be fluent in it. So my English is my first language. So that changes the way that I pray. So I can say prayers in Cree, but I can't, because it's I'm not fluent enough that it's like a first language where it just emerges from me. It's a translation process still. So I'm very conscious of the way that translation process changes the way that I pray. So the ceremonies have boundaries and limitations that are imposed upon them by the English language. So in recognizing those boundaries and limitations, it's really made me study a lot more about Cree philosophy and how we can use our philosophy to create new language. So hopefully some of the ceremonies that we start to create are a little bit more bilingual in that they are carrying the philosophy of our traditional languages, but we can still speak some words in English so that, you know, people can make that shift back and forth between the philosophies behind the languages. And the next thing I started to think about was, so where I did that particular ceremony was a space where there was, I'm going to run a little video here for you, and I hope that you can hear it. So if I'm here, it's relatively calm. It's like I can hear the traffic on the road, and it's totally part of this world. If I take a few steps out this way, it's windier and windier. So if I'm here, all I hear is the wind and the waves, and it's like that world is totally receded. But obviously, if I take a few more steps, I'm going to be totally in that world. And so right here, so where I'm standing right now is really that transition zone where I'm still in one space, but I can really feel the turbulence of that, where there's the sharp transition zone. If I take a couple of steps back, I don't feel anything that way. If I take steps this way, I'm totally into that zone. So right here, it's like all the turbulence is happening right here. Yeah, I forgot to unmute myself. How many times have you heard that over the past 2 years? Oh, you're on mute. So I was taking this, so that was a big part of the knowledge that came to me during that ceremony, was the importance of that transition zone and how you go between things, right? So I think that one of the things that all of us as Indigenous people are conscious of is the fact that change is inevitable. It's like change has always happened. Our planet has always changed, but we as Indigenous people have always had to be able to adapt to to the planet and adapt to the lands that we live on. So adapt to the country, adapt to the sky country, adapt to the sea country. that is what our cultures are all about, is how we live on and with, not even on, how we live with land. And we aren't separate from nature, that we are a part of nature, and we really are close together with it, right? But we're also conscious that we're really conscious of, for me, really, it's conscious about how nature is changing so very rapidly. So I think that currently Indigenous people make up about 5% of the world's population. And I think that the guesstimate figures, because it's hard to find out accurate figures, is that community controlled and Indigenous lands make up approximately 20% of the surface of the planet. So like the water and the land mass. But that 20% and the lands that we control as Indigenous people and community organizations make up about 80% of the world's biodiversity. So we're still able to work with our land in such a way that we're maintaining that biodiversity that's really going to save the planet. So I think that because the 80% of the land that the sort of the mainstream people are in charge of is totally lost all its biodiversity. So it is, I think an impact is that it's going to eventually die. So I think that we need to a little bit step forward as Indigenous people and be training more non-Indigenous people in how to behave properly. Otherwise, they won't have a future on this planet. So anyway, that change is inevitable. So I think that one of the things that we need to be a bit more conscious of, or a bit more careful about, is how we manage that change and do it deliberately or intentionally to make things better, to better fulfill our roles and responsibilities in relationship. Now, every nation, every people, every ceremony leader has their own protocols for how they do things. So I think that part of maybe that change is looking at the reasons behind those protocols and the philosophy behind them, so that we can maintain the principles and the philosophy behind them as we have to change some of our protocols to adapt to things like rising sea level. How on Samoa and Tonga, you're very much in danger of a lot of the land being lost as it goes underwater. So how do we sort of maintain the ceremonies that we do there in such a way that they remain relevant and they remain safe for the people? So a lot of that now is happening on the digital space, right? So as we are engaging here, we're stepping into the digital realm and starting to think about, well, how can we do our ceremonies online? Which is kind of, for me, it's like totally if you had suggested doing ceremonies online 20 years ago, people would have said that's impossible. It's not going to happen, right? But things have changed, and I think that's one thing that COVID has taught us, is we can put a lot of stuff online. So I work with a few different elders, and there was probably back in about September or October 2019, there were quite a few of us that all had different dreams, but all of the dreams had a similar message behind them. And that message was basically to the effect of that we need to find a way to get the land online, and we needed to do our ceremonies, figure out how to do our ceremonies online. So that was in September or October. Several of us had people had dreams about this. And then, we all know what happened in December of 2019 when COVID hit. So it was like, some of us were warned about this ahead of time. And so we started to think about this. And so this is a project that, the community project that I've been working on for a while, is trying to think how we do this stuff in an online space. So again, when I think back, all those things that I learned from the ceremony that I took part in, right? So then how do I apply those in a digital space? So again, the first thing was the importance of traveling and getting there. And I think that when we physically travel, there's a real deliberate separation of the spiritual and the physical zones. And that, ceremony leaders are really conscious of the danger of spiritual zones. Like there are places where great transformations can happen, but there also can be quite dangerous. So that we have to very carefully and deliberately move into those spiritual places, right? And then also we have to very deliberately leave them. So that was a big part of that lesson of learning about that transition. So it's like when I was on the land there, it's calm and it's relatively safe, right? When I was on the very edge of the headland where it's like really windy and turbulent, that's a really dangerous area. It can be really fun too, because it's like, if you want to go hang gliding, that's the place to do it. But it's also very dangerous. So that's where there's great changes are happening. But yeah, we have to be very conscious of how we step into that space and then step back out of it. So starting to think about this again with the digital space, how do we deliberately step into that in a safe way, but also deliberately step out of that? So this is very problematic when we start to think about, say, like our physical homes are the places where we're doing all our work. So it's like our digital offices are part of our home space, but they also become a spiritual space. So there's like a real danger in the blurring of boundaries there. So we have to be very careful to deliberately move into and out of space when we're starting to think about how we do ceremonies online. And just be a bit more conscious of that. All right. So at least I was thinking, like this example of this is like, at least go offline when you're going to go to use the toilet, right? You don't carry your phone with you in live stream then, but it's, we're all conscious of how we do that sort of in an office, but we have to be a bit more conscious of how we do that in a ceremonial space. And some things that we don't necessarily stream live, other things, need to be kept private. But just be a bit more deliberate about entering and leaving that digital space. Again, the importance of language. So I think that people like my children, who are now in their late teens and to mid 20s, are really the first generation of people that were raised in a bilingual sense, but not English Cree or English Maori or Tongan, but English and digital. So they speak digital language is probably even better than they speak English. So that is really changing the way that we as humans think, because there's real limitations around digital language. A binary language, because basically it's binary system, how it's working. How does that work with our analog brains? So it really changes. And I really actually noticed this with the way that teenagers, including my children, think, where they're very used to linear system, the flow chart designs of logic with, yes, no, like a whole series of yes, no decisions to make. So their whole decision process is changed that way. So it's like, it really changes, I think, that things like how they can step outside of that logic system, or to see the big picture view of things is I've noticed is really different than other people. Things like attention span is really short, so it's like they're especially when people are gaming, that rapid response that is required for gaming, it really changes their adrenal system, but it makes them and give them a sense of heightened awareness that's really good for ceremony. But inversely, it really shortens people's attention span when they're in a non-threatening situation. So it's, that good attention span is really good. I mean, that heightened sense of attention is really good for ceremony, but the shorter attention span is really bad for sitting in ceremony. Because you need that longer sense of ritual, what's happening there. So I'm also conscious of how being bilingual and binary has changed people's ways of thinking. And again, the importance of that transition zone. So I think that, when we work with elders and ceremony leaders, are very conscious of the fact that when we go into that spiritual realm, when we're doing ceremony, we have to consciously maintain a sense of groundedness, because we can't be totally in the spiritual realm. I mean, if you're in the spiritual realm all the time, then basically your physical body dies. So that's where our ancestors that have passed on and totally entered into that spiritual realm. They don't no longer attached to a physical body. So ceremony leaders are very conscious of that and very careful about how we enter and move in and out of that spiritual realm, but all to maintain a strong physical connection to the land. So I think that when we start to add, so that's when I start to think about that transition zone, and then it's kind of like, well, we're already used to that with ceremony, like, and it's kind of like when you go to the beach and there's just like, we're conscious of the transition zone between the dry earth and the watery part, and we know how to be careful around that. But as soon as we go and add an extra layer on there of we're going into the spiritual realm, maintaining our physical grounding, but we're also in a digital realm, it adds a whole nother layer of complexity. That's like then, rather than being like on a shallow beach, then we're kind of entering into a space where we're kind of on a headland where we've got the whole series of swirling wind there to also contend with. So we have to be really careful of how we manage that transition zone, because it's adding an extra layer of turbulence that makes it more dangerous. So a lot of our ceremonies, traditionally are deliberately designed to help us focus our attention, and they focus our intentionality. So we're all thinking about the same thing at the same time. And that's when miracles happen in our ceremonies. So now we're adding these whole other layer of it. We have to start to think about how we train our children and ourselves, retrain ourselves to add this extra layer of digital awareness in here. So we're able to maintain our intentionality, able to maintain our attention, for longer than just an adrenal response is going to give us, and just be conscious of that. And the other thing that is to be conscious of the role that the land itself plays in this. So it's like we're all aware of the role that the land plays in our real life ceremonies, right? But the land, it plays a just really crucial and strategic role in sort of shaping and storing and holding, and also the way that knowledge itself is shared. So the land can, really heal us. But I'm also conscious of these days that the land can also really hurt us. And I've noticed that, different researchers, especially in the far north, are really noticing now how, with the rapid impact of climate change, how the land has become a source of anxiety for kids now, because when they go on the land, rather than being in a peaceful environment, they're being impacted by wind turbines, or they're being impacted by the encroachment of oil fields, or whatever it is, that the land has become a source of extra stress for a lot of kids. And the whole anxiety around climate change is making the land a source of stress for them rather than a source of healing, which is terrible. But just to have the importance of land. And I think that, all our traditional laws really come from the land. We store those laws in our star knowledge and our stories in the stars, but the laws themselves come from the land. So if I start to think about those stories, they really teach, in Korea would call them Pastahawin and Chinawin, which teach us about natural law, and they also teach us about sacred law and how to behave ourselves properly, basically. So natural law is, what are the consequences of something? So it's like, if you stand up in a canoe, someone's going to fall in the water. So there's like a natural law sort of thing and a natural consequence. But there's a whole another layer of sacred law where if you disrespect water, that's going to have a whole different sort of consequence, not just on you, but on your children and then your, 7 generations of people. So being conscious of those stories and the laws and the way of behaving that they teach us is really important. So how that works again in a digital space, and how we store our sacred stories that teach people how to behave, and how we monitor access to those stories once they're no longer tied to the land, but they're tied to a digital space, is a really important thing to consider. All right. So really, when I think about it for Cree people, the main sort of guides for behavior is really, it's the Sigi Iwewen, and the closest English translation is practice love in action, or living in a loving way. Maybe it actually is better even. this kind of flows easier in English, practice love in action. So part of that is, different actions that you do, then it's laughing is a demonstration of love. So it's like, we're humorous people. That's good. But also we care about stuff. So when you are demonstrating caring and when you're caring, you're demonstrating your love. So I think, so that's really closely tied to compassion. So it's like when you care for other people, you're compassionate for it, or for the land itself, you're compassionate for it. And when you have that compassion, it forces you to be caring, because it's like you can't then be empathetic. I mean, you have to have empathy rather than be apathetic. You can't be apathetic, because you have to, if you have compassion, you have to care about things. And when you start to care about things, then you share what you have. So you don't become, you're not hoarding and you're not being greedy. You're actually sharing because you have that compassion. You care about other things. So you want to share everything with other people. But that requires a whole level of truth. And that truth is not just to, well, I guess that truth starts with being truthful to yourself so that you're understanding these things. But then you're practicing truth with everything else around you as well. All right, so I sort of rushed through that as quickly as I could, just so we can have more discussion. So hopefully that opens up a little bit of space, a little bit of points to talk about, so that we can have a bit of interesting conversation here.
Thank you, Sean. O mai te paki whānau. So you covered quite a lot in your presentation, Sean, and I'm quite interested in a few things. I remember a conversation, and it related to the earlier kōrero about having a backbone in a house. And I was in a lecture by a gentleman called Po Temara, and he talked about this thing called the liminal line. And you can get up to all sorts of things in the middle of a space. And it's essentially the transition or the meeting point between the spiritual world and the physical world. And I noticed from your presentation that happened quite a bit, where you were talking about transition spaces, places where you're moving from being noa or in a non-sacred space into a more sacred space in your being. Why do you have a particular interest in those transition points? What is it that is of interest, you think, across Indigenous peoples that you find interesting?
Well, I guess for me, that's a big part of well, that's why we do ceremonies, I think, is to, I think anyone can accidentally fall into sacred space. But what we do is when we have ceremonies so that we deliberately enter into that sacred space. So it's like, I don't know if any of you know Uncle Emil Wolfgram. So he's like, I sort of consider him a Trans-Pacifica elder because I think he's Tongan, but he grew up in New Zealand, but lives in Hawaii now. So he's kind of like got different teachings from around the place. But he was describing to me the meaning of the concept of mana. And he said that mana is that space between things in relationship. And so that whenever you do something to make a relationship closer, you're entering into that sacred space. So whenever you make a closer relationship, you're entering into sacred space. So starting to think about how we enter into that space deliberately is really, for me, what the Research as Ceremony is all about. So we design our ceremonies in such a way that we enter into sacred space deliberately and with intention. So when we do a research ceremony, we're entering into the sacred space of building a closer relationship with our research topic, whatever it is. So it's building a closer relationship with an idea, or building a closer relationship with whatever it is that you want to do your research on. So entering in that sacred space there. So do that deliberately. And if we do it deliberately, then we have the potential to create miracles. And I always say that, the miracle that we're after with a research ceremony is a miracle of enlightenment. So we have a deeper understanding of something that we can then use that enlightenment to make changes for the better. So yeah, that's always going in and out of that sacred space, but you can't just go there and stay there. You have to come back out and then use that knowledge for the betterment of the community. That's what makes it a complete thing. You can't just do half of it, I guess.
Yeah, and that leads me to my next question, and it may be an open opportunity for the panelists to participate too, because you talk then about the digital world and the potentiality of our ceremony to start to transition into the digital space, which I find very interesting. Of course, we're in a hybrid event at the moment, you're beaming in, but is it even possible for us to be able to undertake ceremony online? I guess we do have elements of ceremony. You know, we tend to open and close. In the meetings that I'm involved in, we tend to open and close with a karakia or some sort of incantation to bless the conversation. But I guess there's this, and we were forced into it as a result of COVID, that everybody had to learn how to reorient ourselves in a digital space, which has been both positive and not so good for our communities. And we've had to also transition our grieving processes online, so having digital tangihanga. And so can you do that process effectively? So that's my question. I'm just going to post to our panelists, and then I'll pass it back to you, Sean. But is it even actually possible for us to be able to undertake ceremony, or is it only elements of ceremony that we can do in a digital online experience?
I'd have to think about that a lot. I think for me, it is possible and it's become necessary over the last couple of years. So speaking from the perspective of Ngāti Kuri in the far north, we have had to move into an online forum in order to protect, particularly the kaumātua up there. So we had a lot of online wānanga, figuring out what we could do. One of the things that was a wonderful use of technology was the distribution of kai in the far north. So online platforms like Zoom, like Facebook, were used as a way to distribute food amongst the community, particularly when people were isolating. So I think that's one of the ways that technology has been embraced over the last couple of years. In terms of ceremony in a digital space, I'm sure it could happen. I think it's difficult to replace that feeling of having your feet firmly planted on the ground, that sense of tūranga waiwai, that sense of ukaipo, of e hoki ki o maunga ki a puri a koe ngā hau o tāwhiri mātea. There's nothing quite like going home and feeling yourself in that space. But also the reality at the moment is the fact that we are distributed, we are spread across Aotearoa and the whole world. So we have to start using technologies as a way to connect. And I do think that the integration of some of those practices that you just mentioned, karakia, imatanga karakia whakamutunga, remain important in those forums, so that we're led in a tikanga informed way. Those are my 2 cents. Any?
To answer the question, the Tongans made it happen during the pandemic. I just showed Albert a paper that we wrote last year that's now published with the Journal of Global Indigeneity, and how we use kava ceremonies online. And we obviously would have been perfect to have face-to-face, but there was an opportunity where we bridged generational gaps with young people and elders. And I'll give you an example, and I want you to picture this in your minds. We all logged into our Zoom accounts, and then every kava drinker had its own kava background or backdrop as a picture. And we all had our kava bowls in front of us. We all mixed our own kava bowls. And for some, that was their first time they've ever mixed kava in their lives. Not just young people, I'm talking about these men who have never mixed or ballowed kava in their lives. And so the pandemic had allowed them to
have an opportunity to mix their kava. At the same time, it was an opportunity where obviously we're in our own individual spaces, but we created a collective environment through the kava ceremonies online. And it was amazing to see how these men were able to use technology to still create this whaikava environment that we were having online. And we had people who were sharing music. We had the music going in the background. We were talking like we were having a face-to-face kava ceremony on pre-pandemic. And so we were doing that throughout the whole pandemic. And at times obviously when New Zealand went back to started opening borders, some of us enjoyed staying back online because it was an opportunity for us to stay with our families but still carry out ceremonies, if that makes sense. And I think for a lot of our elders, that allowed them to realize that our ceremonies needed to be adapted, just like culture. If it's constantly evolving, our ceremonies must evolve as well. And the pandemic had allowed us to evolve, but still hold on to the foundational values that upholds kava in our ceremonies as well. So I think, I can send the paper to you, Kimberly, and it was just amazing to reflecting on it now. The amount of hours we were just sitting in front of our screens, and still feel like it was a kava session face to face, and be able to shut my laptop, not feel pressure to leave the circle, just close my laptop and go to bed. Whereas now as I've got to jump in a car and drive, there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, it was amazing to reflect on that, particularly with Talanoa today.
Man, what is there to say? Thank you, Sean. I'm really interested in the notions that you're talking about, the idea of the interface, the turbulence, and the kind of those transitional zone. And I think most of us Indigenous people who actively practice some sort of ritual or ceremony, we desperately try to, I don't know if we're pleading or placating the ancestors when we do those things. And when we're on sites, real sites, we're trying very hard to go to that place. And so I think that's to bring those things into our work as academic is obviously it's most important. Most of us here would not be here because we're not doing it. I think we're all doing that sort of work. For the digital world, a lot of us who work in the space, Vamoana Research Cluster, we run a number of events online during the pandemic to try to keep our communities together, and we went through a whole lot of ways to prayers online, check-ins online, how are you going? And you're trying to use all everyday things that we do to kind of, and what do you try to do? You try to replicate them online. We tried that, it didn't really work out. So what, Ufanga Augustino Mahina, who's a colleague of ours, a fellow traveler, Tongan academic who's now retired, and people like Tevita Kaeli, some at the UIU in Hawaii, wonderful thinking kind of material. And I used to think what they did with the way that they always insist whenever there's a Palangi or Pakeha idea, they always insist on a translation in Tongan. And I used to think that's really vulgar, like vulgar Marxism. People twist, and queer theory, they try to twist the thing. But during the pandemic, I realized they're really clever. The notion of literally transliteration, internet into interneti. So, there is a vulgar way that one think of that. You can't do that. But it's a really powerful move. you know, it's that kind of notion of you start to ostracize the master's tools. So it got me thinking about the internet, and we did a kind of experiment where we literally think, okay, for online, the digital space, if it's really virtual, if it's really this other world, and then we're thinking, isn't that the world where our ancestors lived? This sort of thought. So we're really, you know, when we really are talking on the internet, we are actually in the realm of the ancestors, in the realm of Paul, the Kore. And you start thinking all those kind of chaotic things about unable to control information that comes online. Maybe that's what Te Kore is like. That's what war is like. So therefore, how we conduct ourselves, then you got to think, okay, what do we do in our world, in our ancestral world? How do we manage to feel safe in this world when it's, you know, obviously during the day, we are perfectly fine because we can use our obvious senses to deal with the world and the tools that we have. But at night, you know, that's where the ancestral, this virtual world happens. We have so many questions of how to keep things at bay because we just don't know. So that's why prayer, all those things, important knowledge was passed at night around the fire. So what happens if we actually think of digital space as that ancestral cosmic soup? And really that's where we're starting to rethink, you know, vulgar translation of this virtual world is somehow magically, you know, you got to think that magically dawns on the other side of the world, no idea what time it is, but we are there. So we have to, you know, control equivocation or whatever you call it, transliteration of those kind of ideas into the minds of how we are as we have a similar or comparative way to think of that world. So yeah, so that those ideas around how then to make ourselves safe as a community of thinkers in that world, because I think we function really well. I think here in Aotearoa we are, you know, thank goodness we have a tangata whenua who is very solid in the way they make the land safe, make spaces safe for us to be in. And for us who is able to speak our history language, we are able to make those comparative things when we come together. But with digital space, that's another completely world. And I think we have to think that way. We have to think a comparative way from our standpoint, how to deal with that. And I think we have a model.
Hilda, I like this idea of the digital world being one of the 12 or other heavens and a space for miracles to occur, but also drawing on Dr. Okushla O'Carroll's kōrero, actually she's a shasha now, around creating safe spaces online and the way that our young people also need to, like, do our young people think about the digital space as a marae, as a sacred interface of being and operating. And these young people were schooled in their language. They went to Māori medium education spaces, and they didn't see the digital world as a marae, but they thought, but we should and we could. And perhaps that's something that we need to be thinking about, because the things that they could get up to without anybody seeing was both freeing, but then they realized, well, would I do that if my grandmother's eyes were watching me? Would I feel okay to do things like that? So Sean, what I'd like to do is just give you a moment for any reflections on what you've heard. What I think would be great is if we take 5 minutes, have a break, have a water and a muffin, whatever it is, and then we'll come back so that we can finish off our conversations with the panelists. Is that okay with you, Sean? But Sean, yes, last word to you, Ehua. What are your thoughts on what you've heard and this interface of the digital and ceremonial.
Well, I'm so always fascinated with what other people think, and it's because it's like I think especially in parts of the Pacific where your lands are disappearing. In order to maintain your culture, you don't have a choice really of doing it either online or transplanting it to a different land as your land goes underwater. So it's unfortunate, incredibly unfortunate and tragic. But if we don't do it, I think it's important to do it intentionally rather than just by accident, and think about how we're going to do it and make sure that we preserve the most important parts. Yeah.
Thank you, Sean. All right, whānau, let's take a 5-minute break. We're just going to bless our food over here. So Sean, I'd invite you to go and get yourself a cup of tea as well. Perhaps join us in a virtual cup of tea, and we will be back very shortly. All right, good everybody, let's have a break.
Couple more minutes, whānau. Okay, whānau. We'll get ourselves moving. Just a few bunches of food, and I'll invite you to come back over or even bring your food over. I think that's fine.
One advantage of being online, I was just thinking of it's
We nearly started. They're coming back slowly but surely, Sean.
I just think an advantage of being online is I just had like some really garlicky hummus, so you guys don't have to smell my garlic breath there.
Oh, good. Kia ora whānau. I'm going to welcome you back into the zone. Hara mai, hara mai. I'm going to transition. Oh yeah, sweet. And I'll just give you them. I need to just what it is that we all sit around and the ways. I mean, I'm personally that bowl. How come it's Have a space. Kia ora, everybody. Bring your food over. Bring your food over. It's all good. Want you to be nice and relaxed and open. Sean, can you hear okay? Sorry, I know that you can't quite see us very well. One of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little video of the whale so that some of the earlier conversations that were shared, you know, you'll be able to just kind of bring the two parts together. So I'll just do a little external video and an internal video so you can see what the space looks like. Okay, e hoa ma. Moving along with this whole conversation around researchers' ceremony, again, I just wish to acknowledge Melinda Weber, who is the co-conspirator, co-author of this amazing puka puka. I'm grateful that I've purchased one of these myself, but what I thought was this was an opportune moment to explore how has research transformed Kapua and his work. You know, where you stood before you undertook your research, and how intimate did you become with these stories? Because every one of them has a mauri or energy, wairu, a life force that is really interesting and quite a privileged place to be in. So, Iho, I'd love you to again just introduce yourself, but it would be great to give us a little bit of a backstory. Even how did this beautiful book come to life, and some of the learnings that you've had with the researcher ceremony in the back of your mind. Here we go.
And I think we're the best place to start is in this 6-year process that has been writing this book. And I think that one of the transformative parts of this for me has been an enhancement of my identity as someone from the far north, from a place called Ngāti Kuri. So I'm from as far north as you can go. Our boundary, so to speak, starts in a place called Ngātaki on the Hauhora. And then you go up Te Ara Wairua, Te Oneroa Tohe, up to Te Rerenga Wairua, across the Otu, and then down the east coast back to Ngātaki. Those are the kind of boundaries, lands associated with Ngāti Kuri. And for me, this book has not just been writing a collection of stories from Te Taitokero with Melinda, but it's also been an enhanced my knowledge of who I am. So this necklace that I'm wearing now is as an example of an enhancement of knowledge and identity. So I've been wearing this. I've had this for a few years now, and I always knew of this as the pupu harakeke. But in one of the stories that I took to Wānanga with a particular kaumātua, he said, "Yep, one of the names for that is a pupu harakeke, but it's also known as a pupu korari whakarongo taua." Pupu is the generic term for snail, Kōrari is flax, the northern word for flax, and whakarongo taua means listens to war parties. And in one of the stories in this book about a tupuna called Tūmatahina, this small little snail played a central role in this particular story. So this snail is found in the far north, and they used to be all across the landscape. You could find them everywhere. Since that, they've become pretty rare though. And Ngāti Kori were accustomed to walking throughout the land and dodging the snails, whereas a lot of the people from outside our rohe weren't as accustomed to that. So they would stand on the snails when they were walking into our lands. And what happens when you stand on the snail is it emits a squealing sound, and then all the other snails in the area retreat back into their shell, and that rapid compression makes a popping sound. So the initial pupu korari whakarongo tau will be stepped on, and then it will be like a domino effect throughout the lands. So that will be stepped on, then it will go pop, 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 pop away. And the Ngāti Kori people living up there would listen for that sound when people are coming into our lands. So that's just one of the way we start, one of the stories in this book. But to go back to the question that you asked of me, we started this project 6 years ago. I was working with Professor Melinda Weber from Ngāti Kahu, Ngāpuhi, Ngāti Hene, Ngāti Hau, on a project where we were traveling around Auckland and Te Tai Tokero, interviewing Māori students and their whānau, and asking the question, what are some of the primary enablers and barriers to educational success? And one of the key messages that was shared with us in that project was that within the schooling system, the students were saying that they don't really learn about who they are and where they come from as Māori students at school. And that was a finding that really resonated with me as someone who went to a kura auraki, a mainstream school down in Wellington. I don't really remember learning anything about our tupuna Māori, just fragments of things. But what these students were saying really wasn't that surprising. And that's that if we start to put this kind of content into the curriculum, it can be one of the most inspirational forces. So following the StarPath project, Melinda applied for some funding and she secured a Marsden grant and was able to pay for 6 of us to go out and start doing this research and start collecting some of the stories, some of the kōrero tuku iho that were put into this book. And I was just one of the 6. But after about 2 years of full-time work of me working on the project, Melinda approached me and asked me if I wanted to be co-author on this book here. And of course I agreed. One of the important things for us was having this book not only in in the English language, but also in te reo Māori. So after about a year ago, we approached one of the renowned kaiwhaka Māori of the North, Quinton Hita, and he was like on the top of the list in terms of who we would have liked to have translated this book. So we just flicked off an email to him and crossed both of our fingers and crossed our toes and hope for the best. And he came back to us and agreed to do it. And that was just one of the most wonderful parts of this whole project was over the course of the year, he would send back chapter by chapter, and we would open the book, open the email, and just feast on that northern reo. And just connecting back into what you were saying, Albert, you know, one of the distinctive parts of the northern reo is the use of transliterations. Krani mama, krani papa, grandpa, grandmother, all of those sort of words. And just while you were talking, it reminded me of when my dad was living in the far north. He was sitting around the table with some kaumatua, and he was just learning reo at this time. He was not a native speaker. He was from, my grandmother shifted down to the South Island, and he was born and raised there. And he was forever in these situations where he was being spoken to in the reo, when he had to kind of just fake it until he made it. And then one of the kaumatua there was like, "Oi, ho mai tērā mea?" And she was pointing across the table, and he's going, "Oh, what one? What one?" And he said, "Tērā mea, tērā mea." And she said, and then she said, "Tērā mea, you know, pura te pune, long time taka." And that was the name for golden syrup. So you put the spoon in, long time taka, it takes a long time to fall. Pura te pune, long time taka. There's a kupu ho. One of the surprising things I think that I would like to touch on, which I suppose is the most obvious link between what we're talking about today in this book, is how wānanga was central to the collection of kōrero. Our process was to go and find out as much as we could about a particular tupuna. And we felt that that was doing our due diligence. We didn't want to go to kaumatua with nothing to contribute and say, "Can you fill our kete?" We felt that that was a bit of a disrespectful approach to take. So we went away and we did as much research as we could. And reading books, reading collections of whakatauki and pepeha, learning waiata, learning tauparapara, learning matara. And from there, we went to the kaumātua and we said, "This is what we've found. What do you think of this? Are there any other layers of nuance you would like to add?" And that proved to be the best way to go about this work. But one of the things that I found was, that I reflected on, is what is this process of wānanga? What is this thing we call wānanga? And I think that a lot of the, it's translated to interviews, and a lot of the books we read, and we kind of have this picture of me sitting here and you sitting there, and we're just exchanging information. And then the relationship finishes, I go away and I write my paper and I leave you there. And what I found in my own research with my iwi of Ngāti Kori is that really it was more the establishment of a relationship that included learning about these kōrero, but it had so many more dimensions to it as well. So I'll just provide a couple of examples. I was learning te reo Māori, or I was doing a te reo Māori paper called Te Aupikitanga ki te reo Kairangi e te wānanga o Aotearoa. And there was this man who used to always stand up and do the mihi whakatau. And he was really passionate or proud about his Ngāti Koritanga. He would always somehow insert the fact that he was Ngāti Kori into his kōrero. And during one of the lunchtime, I approached him and I said, "I've been learning about Tūmatahina, and I'm wondering if you know anything about this particular ancestor." And he said, "I do, but my tuakana knows more." And then he grabbed out his phone, and then he started dialing, and then he rang and he goes, "Oh, kia ora e te tuakana, kei konei tētahi uri no Ngāti Kori, he ana ia ki te rangona he kōrero mo Tūmatahina. Oh, ka pai." And then he handed the phone over to me. And I was just, and this was Matua Here Maia Hopihana Romana Jerry Norman. And and he said, "Oh, come over to my whare and we'll have a conversation." 6 months later, we start talking about Tūmatahina. And for me, that said a lot. It said there was a period, we were both from Ngāti Kori, but he wanted to learn who I was and what my intentions were with this kōrero. He wanted to see, was I going to go and run away with it and make myself look cool, or did I have genuine intentions with this kōrero? We exchanged whakapapa and things like that. And at the end of it, we started having some really deep kōrero, and he's the one who told me the story about this. And that transformed me as a person, because I went from someone who just wore this because that's what Ngāti Kuri people do, to someone who understood why we wore it, and that this was, you know, a kaitiaki of sorts for our people. And through Matua Jerry, he introduced me to a whole bunch of the whānau from Ngāti Kuri. And another one, main person who I spoke to in data collection for this book was Matua Wayne Petera, and he was crack up. So I met him, and similar sort of thing, he started, you know, there was a bit of a feeling out process, but then eventually he rang me up one day again. A lot of this seemed to happen on the phone. He rang me up and he said, I have a request. And as you know, you can't really refuse requests from your kaumātua. And he said, there's a program I want you to be on. It's called, and then he's rustling in his notes, and he goes, it's called Celebrity Treasure Challenge. I'm like, oh, no. But I'm going, yes, okay, all right. And so he was, what's that word? Voluntold. He voluntold me to come up and support him on the show Celebrity Treasure Island, because it was being filmed in the Ngāti Kuri Rohe. And when I drove all the way up, they had a flash gold car for me, and I drove up, and we were meant to go out and we were providing kaimoana for the participants, and we were meant to go and go fishing, but me and Matua Wayne were late, so they'd already gone out on the boat by the time we got there. And then he's like, oh, well, we might as well make the most of this time, eh? And so we're up there at Kapowairua, Spirits Bay, at the bottom of our Maunga Piko, or as he calls it, Mango Piko. And he's like, let's start talking about Pōhurihanga, another one of the tupu in this book. And I'm like, oh, scrambling for my notes, you know, got this fragment of notes that I can write on. And we start talking about Pōhurihanga, and through that process, I was able to add all these other layers of nuance into the kōrero. And one of those I'll just share quickly, maybe to wrap this up, is I came with this idea. Pōhurihanga was a tupuna from a iwi called Ngāti Kaharoa, and they came over from Hawaii to Aotearoa. And one of the main islands that a lot of wakahaurua used to stop at was Rangitahua, or the Kermadec. And that was a place, there was fresh water there and things like that, so you could replenish your boat and things like that. But the Kura Haupo, which was Pōhurihanga and Te Maungaroa's waka, actually was wrecked in Rangitahua, or crashed. And one of the ways that we patched together our waka again was to use the skin of the kurimoana, the seals, the waterproof skins, and we lashed that to the hull and were able to repair the waka and continue our voyage to Aotearoa. Hence, which is one of the explanations for the name Ngāti Kuri. Kuri meaning dog. And I was up there, you know, and I was saying to Matua Wayne, oh, this is the kōrero that I've heard, you know, when we came to Rangitahua, we crashed into the reef. And then, you know, that's how we damaged our waka. And he was like, I don't like that kōrero. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, what does it say about our navigators? And then his father was a man called Charlie Petera. And the kōrero that they had was that we used to follow the whales on their migration, and that the Kura Haupo was wrecked when a tail flipped up and smacked into our waka, and that's how we became damaged. So there was another kōrero. Later on, another kaumātua came in, and he was like a guy who's been on boats throughout the whole world, and he was like, nah, actually, the hardest part of the whole voyage is landing, so I believe the kōrero about the reef. But anyway, it just went on, and that was one of the real difficulties to this work, was actually ascertaining, you know, there's always different kōrero. So for us, we came to this junction where we had to decide, do we try and find the right one, you know, the right one, or do we include both, or do we do something else? And our approach was to include both, versions, one of them in the main body, one of them in the main text, and then one of them in the footnotes. And that was something that we felt really comfortable with, because it really wasn't up to us to ascertain, that one is tika and that one is he ana tērā kōrero. But we're also open to challenge. That's a normal central part of research, is other people will have different versions, and that's totally okay. And that's already happened. So I think I'll just conclude on that is that this notion of ceremony, for me, I was able to experience what it means to build relationships, and that be a foundational, fundamental part of the process of research. I'd read about it a lot before, but to actually experience and feel what building relationships can do for you in your research was the main thing that I'll take away from this work. Kia ora, thank you all for listening. And it's just a privilege to be here and share this work with you today. Tēnā tātou.
Kia ora kapua. Now we're going to we'll try and transition across to some photos. It's really important to hear, a bit of your backstory around the next steps for your puka puka anyway. And we just hopefully get that done. Yeah, so you went and launched the book up north, is that correct?
Yeah, about 2 weeks ago, we went and launched at one of my marae, Waiora in Ngātaki. And then we went down to Okorohi marae in Kaikohe, to Quinton's marae. And next Tuesday, we're going up to Melinda's marae, Pihiaweri in Whangarei. But when we went to Ngātaki, to Waiora marae, we launched in part of this already existing kaupapa. My dad took the story of Tūmatahina, and he went back to the schools of Ngātaki and Te Hāpua, and he created a mahitoia performance with them, with some of the other mahitoi practitioners, Murimu Sarich in the north. And this was really about, for us, it was not wanting to have these kōrero just sit in a book. It's about having them be used in ways that are actually transforming the lives of the communities that matter most for us. And so these are the tamariki of Te Hāpua and Ngātaki School. One really cool little thing was when my dad was reading this story to the kids up there, they were all sitting around and he was reading it from the book, and he finished, and one of the kids said to my dad, they said, "Was he real?" And he was able to say, "Yep, he was real, and he's one of your tupuna." Oh, that was them weaving the rope that Tūmatahina used to cross from Murimutu to the mainland. Another thing was the way, I'll just maybe conclude on this actually, is the way our matara and our tauparapara became more relevant. So I always use this one. It might be familiar to some of you. Ruia, ruia, ope, ope, whiria, whiria, tahia, tahia, kia he moa ki te kā kua kua, kia he rea mai ki te kā wau koroki. E tatangi mai ani roto i tana pūkoro whaikaro. He kuaka marangaranga, ko tahi te manu i tau. Tau atu ki te tahuna, tau atu e. So that's a matara that actually just encapsulates the whole kōrero that's going on here. And I used to say it and not really know what it meant. But now I say it and I know that it refers to the story. It's the boy that played Tūmatahina. And that's my dad there acting the goose. Bethany Edmonds.
O mai te paki e hoa mā. It was beautiful. I definitely love, and there's something quite unique, or maybe not, about Indigenous researchers is that it's not just about doing something for a paper or even just about writing the book. And I think this links back to how is research both ceremonial and transformative. And I loved how you took a story, you know, even if it took 6 months, probably now 6 years since you started that conversation with your kaumātua, and then undertook the work to not just extract information, but to build a relationship and connection so that these stories came up off the page and became like 5D lived experiences. And then you brought that kōrero back to your own people. And then, yeah, they're now interacting with the story as a living part of their whakapapa. For you, what did it feel like seeing your dad do that work, but also to see the children awaken themselves to a tupuna that you helped not bring back to life, but helped to shine the light on again?
I think maybe it was just it just captured that notion of past, present, and future that we were talking about in the whare yesterday. So we had the elders there who would be above my dad's generation, and then we had him and the others there, and then we had the tamariki there, and it just really captured beautifully. So the elders being the people who contributed to this book, it captured that notion of intergenerational transmission of knowledge. But also, I think it links into this concept of place-based learning that we talk about in education. And that's when a narrative, a piece of learning becomes incredibly powerful when you can walk over to the place where that unfolded and touch the land and see where it happened. So one of the moimoia in this project is to take all those kids back to the island where this particular kōrero unfolded so that they can be there themselves. And that's really kind of goes back to that idea, you know, when we're learning in a schooling environment, a lot of what I learned happened overseas. So it really was, there was that sense of removal from what I was learning just because of that geographical distance. So, you know, we're learning about these wars that happened in, you know, Turkey, or, you know, and I enjoyed that content, don't get me wrong, but there's something about learning about something and then being able to go there that makes it incredibly powerful as an educational tool.
Kapua, last partai, Sean talked about miracles. Miracles can happen in these in-between spaces and when things kind of meet up and connect. What were some of the miracles that you saw unfold as part of this process for you?
I think just the way we were backed was a really surprising thing. It was quite scary doing this work because you know, you put yourself in this position where I think I've already touched on it. You know, we knew that we would have, as Melinda puts it, growling from nannies who have other kōrero. So we were kind of, I've always expected this point where we experience huge challenge or from someone, but actually every experience we have had has been greeted with open arms. So when we approached the likes of Quinton, you know, he agreed and he added his mana and his expertise to the project. And then we thought we'd test our luck again, and we approached Shane Cotton, who's from Ngāti Hine, Mapuhi, to do this cover art here. And again, that was just, you know, we thought, oh, there's no way he's going to agree. His paintings sell for 600K, you know. But he read the book and he went, oh, yeah, I'll do it. And he did, this is an original piece here. So it was just, you know, that was a miracle. And for us, this gives us, you know, we can hand this over to people and have the confidence that the book looks beautiful. Because our people deserve that.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much, Kapua, to you, your team, all the whānau that were involved. You know, sometimes we don't ever get to see the the backstory or the journey or everything that went, all the edits and all the dramas that go into pulling something together. But it's not just a miracle that that book came to life. I think it was very intentional. Again, just listening to Sean's kōrero earlier around the intention behind it, perhaps tupuna led, where they were just saying, hey, it's time for our stories to be brought to the light, for our whānau to re-engage with us, which I think is a significant contribution to our people of Te Tai Tokerau. And equally, it was great to hear a bit of kōrero about your people. Haere ora kia koe. Right, we're on the tail end, Te Hoa Ma. We're going to move into our next session. And as mentioned, ceremony is something that we can talk about and that we can create, amazing presentations, but there's nothing better than actually doing something. So I'm going to pass that across to you, brother, to guide us on the next step. Because everybody's probably just a bit curious, going, what's been going on over there, and our bro's been waiting for us. And I'd really love you to guide us on how you do this and how this also relates to research as well.
Thank you. Can I please get everyone to please stand and make your way to the whala, shoes off or on? I'll leave that up to you. But at the same time, I want you to sit next to someone that you have no idea who that person is. Find someone new that you want to sit next to. Please sit around. So I want to have someone to sit next to to Ata, and then make a circle from there. I'll give you guys 2 minutes to do that. Eh? I'm trying to be a teacher here, so
Sean, can you see okay? Sorry, I don't have a Zoom capability, but yeah, you're here with us. All right.
For those who want back support, please grab a chair and then sit. This is how I do it. It helps me. One break. For the time. Someone to fill in that space there. Oh, just turn to the person sitting next to you and give them a high five. That had to be one of the most quiet and awkward high fives. Yeah. Do it again. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, it's Friday. Come on, we should be looking forward to this. Kava, the plants and beverage of the Pacific. What I coined in my master's study. I've got my PhD was in public health, looking at gambling and problem gambling amongst the Tongan community. Currently doing some research around internet online addiction, around social media addiction, pornography, and also online gaming from a Pacific perspective, and also part of a master's study looking at infertility and assisted reproductive technologies, sensitive issues amongst Pacific communities, but issues that I love to touch on because I'm not doing it for my communities today, I'm doing it for my daughter's generation to come. And I believe the research that we all do, if it's not going to make an impact today, it's going to make a better impact in the future. Kava as a ceremony, I mentioned earlier that the word ceremony doesn't really sit well with me. And in Pacific context, ceremony is very formal. And as a young person, it doesn't give us the space to enter a formal ceremony. But similar to culture, the ceremony here is constantly evolving from formal to informal. It's going the other way. To the extent where I'm now trying to portray Kava sessions or Kava practice as a research methodology for our young civic scholars. And the way I do this is to try bring in what we do in the community and to have that reflected in our research practice. There's no point of us doing research if it's not going to be a true reflection on the community that we serve. Hence why I try bring in these practices into research world to try and make sense of what we are doing for our communities, by the community. Kava. Can I get a show of hands for those who have had Kava before? Raise your hands if you have had Kava before. Yep. Keep it up more than once, more than twice, 3 times. If your hand is up for more than 5, then you are now regarded to be a Kavaholic. Yeah. Be proud of that. Yeah. So if you don't have a DR next to your name, at least you got Kavaholic next to your name now. Kava is a plant. And I'll get there's a graffiti to please. That's the plant here. Pass it around. And it's the roots of the plant that we now, which we'll be drinking here. And I'll grab the bag. So this is the Kava. The roots of that plant is now pulverized into powdered form, which will now be passed around. I want you to have a smell of the Kava. Have a smell of the Kava. The Kava is from Tonga. I'll give you the ranking of how I perceive the strongest Kava to the weakest. Strongest Kava in the Pacific, Vanuatu, by far. Second to that, Pohnpei, Micronesian Islands. Third, Hawaii. 4, Fiji. 5, Tonga. Last but not least, my favorite, sorry, the Samoans. So, and a lot of people will say it depends on the roots, on the soil. I look at it by water. Now, for example, in Vanuatu, when they mix Kava, it's like this. Kava is like this, water is like that. You can imagine the amount of Kava you've been drinking, right? Here, for this session or for this practice here, we'll go half-half to ensure that you can go back home safely. Yeah, and also have lunch after this. I did mention in an earlier Kava session where Takawaho was part of that you'll have a good sleep, and unfortunately she didn't have a good sleep. But you will have a good sleep tonight. Yeah, I hope so. So Kava, I used it in my master's and PhD research as a tool, as an alternative to focus groups. A lot of the research, particularly qualitative study, a lot of them do focus groups. And I swapped that by saying, I'm going to run Kava sessions. And it was, focus groups and individual interviews are determined by time. And these sessions, it depends on the Kava when it's finished. So, I could, in an ethics application, we write down, we're going to do a focus group. It's going to last us 45 minutes to an hour and a half and all that kind of stuff. In my focus group for the Kava session, I went on for 4 or 5 hours. And it was amazing to hear the richness of just talking about gambling and problem gambling in a circle. And it was an intergenerational space. You had elders, young people, and the elders allowed us to speak. In Pacific cultures, that's rare to have. You have someone of high rank to allow you to speak at a practice or a ceremony like the Kava session. And I used it in my master's and my PhD, and these men, they felt like this could also be a dissemination spot. So this is one of my challenges to service our social and health providers, use the Kava circles or use the Kava ceremonies as an opportunity to disseminate resource and information to our Pacific communities. As males, we play a pivotal role, not just in decision-making, but also in our family settings. And you go to South Auckland, there's roughly over 200 Kava clubs, informal Kava clubs like this in South Auckland alone. And imagine if we had the opportunity to engage with these circles, over 200 Kava clubs, and talk about education, talk about health, talk about issues that we see today. I think we will see a rise of cultural identity a sense of belonging for our young people. Stay away from youth gang affiliation, drug use and abuse, teenage pregnancy, and other social issues that our young people face today. So we're going to have a drink. Yeah. So the rule is, no, there is no rule. We will all have a drink. If you don't want to have a drink, that's fine. And that's $20 to me outside. No jokes. Once you get your cup, the Samoans have a way of doing it, and feel free to do whatever you want to do with the you receive your cup. In Tongan context, it's bottoms up. Yeah, once you get your cup, you drink it. And then we all have a talanoa regarding the taste of the kava. Yeah, because Ata's been sitting here for the past 2 hours, mixing and mixing. The longer you mix, the stronger the kava, if that makes sense. Yeah, which means the more beautiful the lunch will be that Kay Marie and the team has provided for us. I'll get the two to sitting next to the toa. So the toa in Tongan context is a role of a young female that's single. In traditional Tongan, the kava ceremonies were seen as a form of courtship. Yeah? So before mobile phones, where we texted and Tinder apps and all that kind of stuff, we used the kava sessions or kava ceremonies as the means to find love. Imagine we had Ata, who was a young female, and then we had Professor Rafiti on the side. Courtship, they were courting. And our role here, we were serenading them with little Tongan love songs. That makes sense. Yeah. Unfortunately, there are times where the toa wouldn't be interested in the person sitting next to him, or would be interested in the person playing the guitar and singing the love songs, if that makes sense. That's how my mom and dad met, through the courtship of the kava sessions. Today, that practice is no longer happening, and it's slowly declining because our young Tongan females are not interested in this kind of stuff. And our young boys are just a text away, right? So this is how it usually goes. A young Tongan man would knock on the door. So there was no doors in the Tongan whales. It was pretty much like this. So go to the whale, ask the father of the daughter to come and serve their kava. Today, that's no longer happening. Our young boys are sitting in their cars, texting, come out the back door, I'll meet you down the street. The rest is history. But imagine doing it in a very culturally safe and appropriate way. I think it will bring respect back to parents as a young man, and as the young female, they will see this man or this young boy is really interested in me, and he cares for my parents in a culturally safe way. So that's the formal. That was the courtship. Today, that's evolved, and now we see today. We see a lot of music being involved. Where we try to revitalize Queen Salote's songs, and also history, Tongan history, and being spoken about in these circles. A very intergenerational space. Intergenerational is really, it's missing in a lot of our research as well. And what better way to do it but do it in a session or ceremony that allows both generations and a really safe cultural practice as well. Okay, Albert and so my dear, please grab a cup and we'll just pass it around. So when you're passing the cup around, imagine there's a rope being attached to the cup. That imaginary rope allows us to be transparent and accountable to everyone serving in the circle, if that makes sense. Making it a safe space for everyone to talk about things. Yep. If you look at the whale on top of us, it's the same shape as the kava ball if you flip it. Yep, once you grab your cup, you can have a drink. And you have to finish the cup. You have to finish the cup, okay? There's none of these, the British ladies, when they have tea parties, you go sip, sip. Yeah. Go for it. If you want to take a snap, a video of you drinking, that's $5.
stories, do you have stories of, you know, where potential massive battles were averted because a kava ceremony, like what we'd call, say, a peacemaking process? Have you got circumstances, same things happen for your people in Tonga?
So, you know, the Samoans have the ifonga. So those who saw the Dawn Raid apology where Jacinda Ardern had the mat over her, Tongans, we use the kava bowl as a form of conflict resolution. And it was bringing parties, the two parties together to resolve conflict within a village, within families and all that kind of stuff. My current issue at the moment is the challenge of making it normal and normalizing this practice, not just in my community, but also in research and also university spaces. And in my master's research, I coined this concept here, a cultural classroom, as an opportunity for Pacific students across the university, not just within the discipline, to come together and I have to drink. Before I carry on, can I get a show of hands for those who have had that tingling sensation on you? Oh, well done. You're officially baptized. They've gone through the kava session now, which is a normal feeling to have. The more you have it, the more numb. If you talk too much in your spaces, there's one way of shutting you up big time. And if you know of colleagues in your office that talks too much, bring them here. We'll give them kava as well. Yeah, but it's an opportunity to bridge gaps between generations, conflict. I use it as a tutorial space for Māori Pacific students, where I bring students from different disciplines. Imagine this: a student comes in with an essay question. We all come in from different disciplines. He just lays out the question, and we all contribute from our different perspectives and disciplines that we belong to. At the end of the kava session, the student will go back home with a structure of an essay of different perspectives and angles. But as they provide as a marker, I look at it by seeing what their stuff are, and then I go, that's analytical thinking, that's critical reflection, and all that kind of stuff. It will provide an A+ for a student. This is nothing new to us. This is what we did back in the Pacific. Futahelo coined, with the late Professor Futahelo in Tonga, he used this as an opportunity to get his students at the time to talk about theories and practices and reflect on ancient history and Tongan culture. What better way to do it? But that's what I'm trying to revitalize here at the University of Auckland and any space I go to. Is I take the kava bowl with me. And it's shaped in a circle for the specific reason to ensure that we all are accountable to each other. Imagine it being in a classroom. This is my conflict with the Western society, our Western classrooms. A teacher stands and a student is sitting down on the chairs, right? Automatically creating power dynamics of students. And right here, we're all eye to eye. We can all see each other. And in Pacific cultures, this is a normal classroom that we constantly want to preach in community. And so if our community is doing it right, we should be doing it right at the university spaces as well, and also in research. That's my challenge. Is many of the up and coming research, whatever you do, whether your methods and methodology, make sure it's a true reflection of the community that you serve. Yeah, well, quite a few. Well, I wasn't scared of doing it. I wasn't scared of what the ethics team will say to me. In fact, we're now at a time where we actually have to fight to have our practices normalized, particularly kava use. And here's the misperception: kava is not alcoholic. If you're coming into the space by thinking that kava is an alcohol, you're wrong. And there's a lot of research that says that as well. If I look at it, kava is almost similar to coffee, a green tea. And yet we don't prevent that kind of stuff when we're writing up ethics or in research anyways. But when it comes to kava, everyone's questioning it. Everyone's questioning it. It doesn't make sense to us. And to the point where our own Pacific people are questioning it. That's half of the battle that I'm trying to do here. Is educate not just non-Pacific, but our own people to understand such practices will exist for a reason, to show that what the community is doing was also reflected in university spaces. I know there are kava scholars here, kava drinkers here. Please feel free to contribute on your reflection on kava. Albert is the kava guru from a Samoan perspective. And also Fiji have their own perspective as well. The history of kava is also interesting as well. It's a female, the daughter of a couple. From Tongan history, kava is the daughter of a couple from Eweki, a small island outside mainland Tonga. At the time, the king's voyages were going around and conquering the Pacific, including Samoa. Unfortunately, we lost in the World Cup. But we'll give them this one. So when someone of high rank and status comes to your island, comes to your house, your home, you must prepare a grand feast for that person. It's similar to going to a marae, right? The village will come together, prepare a grand feast. In research, what do? Come together with biscuits, cheese and crackers, and hummus. And so when the king he made a pit stop at this island, and the whole village got together to try and prepare a grand feast at a time where there was a massive drought. The couple, Whewanga went to his plantation and saw he was trying to get a giant taro. When he went there, the king was resting at his giant taro. He had a discussion, long story short, he had a discussion with his wife. They decided to bury alive their one and only daughter, Kava. Hence the name, Kava. Their sacrifice is almost similar to preparing an umu, or hangi. And the king heard about this manifestation, he took off. Went back to mainland Tonga, to the palace, his residence. 2 years later, 2 plants rose from this hangi or burial grave of Kava. At the bottom was the kava plant. At the top was a sugar cane. Yep. Has anyone ever had a taste of sugar cane before? Yep. So when we drink kava, you'll see a lot of Tongans and Fijians do this. When we drink kava, it's real bitter, right? But we chase that away with the sugar cane, something sweet. Today, the sugar cane is now replaced with Mountain Dew, pecans, and lollies. Also contributes to obesity, diabetes, and other health issues. I'd imagine just having sugar cane. Amazing. Yeah? So that's the history of kava. In Samoa, and I'll get Albert to share a Samoan perspective on kava.
So the Samoan kava, the origin of kava in Samoa. In the Popo and Wharenui, there's Pawa, P-A-W-A, Pawa, one of the ancestors. There was an ancestor named Pava in Samoa. And when the Tangaloa clan first arrived in Samoa, there were already people residing in Samoa. Kava plant was already there. And so this man called Pava hosted the first Tangaloa clan person who arrived in Samoa. His name is Tangaloa Wee or Tangaloa Maui. Some of us think that is our Maui, Tangaloa Maui. Tangaloa Maui has got a long genealogy. I won't get on into it, but he was a demigod, son of Tangaloa, and a woman called Wee. That's why his name is Tangaloa Maui, Tangaloa and Wee. Anyway, Ava had prepared the cover in a tānoa. Probably back in the day was called a umeti, when there were no legs. While Ava was preparing the cover, his young son, the boy, started jumping around. And Tangaloa, we warned the boy not to jump around the umete. And the boy would not stop. So Tangaloa picked up the boy and cut the boy in half and killed him. And so Ava, who was so distraught, couldn't go on with the ceremony. So Tangaloa picked up the parts of the boy, put it in the tānoa and revived the boy. So it's similarly to the Tongan, and I think you will find the Vanuatu one and the Fijian one, that the origin of kava always comes from killing or the death, or usually a young person, and their resurrection. And we now understand that kava as a liquid, as a ceremony, replaced blood sacrifice. Whenever a sacred space was being made sanctified for rituals or someone was killed and used as a way to make the space sacred. So we think that all the stories connected to kava right throughout Mana Nui is connected to that, the liquid being the symbolic replacement of destruction of a human person. For Samoa, when we pick up the kava, we libate, it's called libation to the ground, and in remembrance of the origin of kava, it's the having this ability to resurrect and manuia means well-being, to be well, to live.
As a New Zealand-born Tongan, I don't have land in Tonga, unfortunately. But when I drink kava, kava is a symbol of the whanua, or the land in Tonga. So my connection or my reconnection back to Tonga is by drinking kava. And it's amazing that when you have that spiritual encounter of having a drink of kava, and by reflecting on this is the same beverage or the same practice that my grandfather, who I haven't met, was doing back in his times. Coming together in a circle and drinking kava. My late father, who passed away earlier this year as a result of COVID, I entered the circle with him at the age of 14. And I saw a different side to him at a kava session. At home, he was this typical Pacific man. He worked hard, came home, didn't smile, no emotions, and just ate and sleep, and went back to work. At the kava sessions, he was this joker. He was telling jokes. It was this radio. And I say radio because he was constantly talking. And I was saying to myself, man, I said to my mum, why isn't he talking at home? But he comes to the boys and just talks and drinks. And then I realized after that it was an opportunity. Me sitting there had allowed me to reflect on his way of communication. And this practice has become a safe space for a lot of Pacific males to come and share sensitive issues they can't share anywhere else. And my father could, he could sing traditional Tongan songs. And he said to me when I was singing in one kava session, I want you to sing the song. And when I started, I tried to sing and he jumped on. And from that moment onwards, I felt this automatic connection with my dad that I couldn't get from him at home. And it was through the kava circles. And so, it's an opportunity where you establish and nurture relationships with people from different ages, from different disciplines, from different work occupations and all that kind of stuff. Like what we're doing today, we're all coming in from different spaces, but the kava has allowed us to connect in a way that's almost spiritual as well. Let's have another drink. So what usually happens, right? We drink, and then we talk. And then once the talanoa, the discussions get quite saturated, we drink again. Taking the extra cup, it instigates more topics, discussions to take place. And then once we run out of stories, we sing songs and we drink. And the singing of that song will generate a story that makes sense. And that's why we're storytellers, because we love to tell stories. So we'll have another drink, because I know Ata has mixed another bucket. So if you think the cover's finished, yeah, if you think it's finished, there's another bucket on the side. And then once we have this round, I've got a question for you to end this session. Then we'll have lunch, or we'll keep on going here, if that makes sense. If you have any questions.
Kia ora. Thank you for this opportunity to be here. Only kava I've had is from Vanuatu. My girlfriend and I, when we finished our bachelor's degree in teaching, we booked ourselves a trip. It was really cheap to go to Vanuatu. That's what we could afford. And that was the first time that she had left her children behind. She's a solo mum. And we had booked ourselves into backpackers in Vanuatu. When we arrived, we went, no way, we're not staying there. We found this amazing, it was a 3-star accommodation space. And number one, that was the name of the region that we were staying at. And it was actually like a 5-star hotel. We got best service. We were treated like royalty. At the pool to ourselves. They knew where to go to get the best kava, and it looked really dingy. Like, it looked really scary going to the kava bar with them. So my only 3 experiences in kava ceremony is in Vanuatu and then here. So thank you very much for this. My girlfriend, she had been sober for about 7 years and was quite hesitant to have kava, especially in a place that looked so dingy. Honestly, it was really quite scary. And she left with just the biggest smile and was really, really open to more conversation. And we spent many hours in conversation with the locals there who still hold a good, special place in our hearts. So thank you so much. It's another special moment to add to that.
Thank you. Before, as you can see here, the filtering bag, does anyone know where you buy these from? Have a guess. You buy the filtering bag from? I haven't heard that one before, but that's a flash vacuum that you have. Yeah. No, you buy it from Rosine paint shop. Yeah. So because that's the original one that we use, the faux, to take away the kava when it's mixed. That's the traditional use of it. But because the Tongans were so smart when we migrated to New Zealand, and we couldn't come over with the faux, we ended up going to the Rosine shop. We saw the filtering bags. We said to ourselves, man, this will work. Yeah. So if you see a bunch of Pacific men going into Rosine, they're not buying paint, they're buying kava bags. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And so, yeah, hence why we use it. During COVID, not everyone had filtering bags like this. So everyone was using the likes of pantyhose and other stuff as well. I have no idea where they got it from. A lot of them didn't have kava bowls, so they had plastic containers. Yep. A lot of them didn't have kava cups. They were all using wine glasses and ordinary cups. But so I guess what I'm trying to say there is that the practice will stay the same, However, everything around it will evolve. If that makes sense. So unless the foundational values still stays the same, doesn't matter what happens across. If that makes sense. In Tongan concept, we use the concept of the tauwhatonga motua, ancient, the true Tongan values. This stays the same. Whatever happens, the environment will change. The values will adapt, if that makes sense. The practice will evolve, but the values will stay the same.
Hey, everyone, I don't know if you can hear me, but I've got to get going. So it's been wonderful discussions with everyone, and thanks.
Hey.
Bye.
We'll send over some kava to you, Sean.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, I can't remember. When you go to Auckland Museum, you'll see my fiberglass carver bowl there. I sold it to them. But I purposely gave it to them because one day I want my generation, my kids, grandkids, to see that as a simple. Mm.